Hi, LinkedIn. My name is Matt Hames, and I'm the Associate Vice President for Digital and Social Strategy at 3Enrollment Marketing. Welcome to part 5 of the 5-part series. Part 5 was supposed to happen on Friday, but storms took out power and internet from my house all day Friday. So I didn't get to do part 5 on Friday, so here we are on Monday. If you're new to me or any of this, 3Enrollment Marketing is a place filled with experts who are making a difference for institutions around the country. We have so many people at 3E who live for helping students find the right institution of higher education. Honestly, they just absolutely live for this. It's one of our core tenets. It's one of the great things about 3E is I get to really focus on Google search and understand how Google search works. A couple of weeks ago, we had our all hands where we talked about the future of higher education search. And that got me thinking about the future of Google search, which is why I wanted to put this together, because we're at a really interesting time in Google search. This is as a former copywriter, this is one of my all-time favorite quotes. This is from John Wanamaker of Wanamaker Department Stores. Basically, the way to think about this is that if your product is men's underwear and you buy a billboard, then obviously half of the money you spend is going to be wasted, right? That's what he's basically saying. Well, I like to think about that in terms of digital, that half of the things that we do in digital are kind of wasted, especially as things change. We're gearing up for conference season. So there's going to be people who are going to be saying, here's how I use Reddit. Here's how I use such and such. Like, you're just going to go to sessions where people say, this is what I'm doing, and this is how you can have success as well. And the big thing to think about is the opportunity costs. When people were standing up saying you should be on Facebook back in the noughties, when they were saying you have to have a Facebook page, what people weren't saying is the opportunity cost of having a Facebook page that you have to run all the time is you can no longer do X, because there's only a finite amount of time in the schedule. What they also weren't saying when you started an admissions Facebook page is what the opportunity costs of splitting your message on an admissions feed and on a main feed. What were the opportunity costs of that? So the big thing that you should think about as you go into conference season this year, or even as you start another enrollment cycle, is what are the opportunity costs of doing this? If I do this, what can't I do anymore? And that's a big question when you get to search. So we talked about this. We talked about the .edu in the first episode of this. We talked about the first marketing tactic you had to have. What are the opportunity costs of refreshing a .edu every 6 years? When, and this is an important stat, the .edu is new to every single paying person every 6 years. So every year the .edu is new to prospective students. And if your graduation rate is about 5 years, if it's 4 to 5 years, then every 6 years it is brand new to every single prospective student and current student. So the only reason to refresh a website is for faculty and staff. So the opportunity cost of redoing the .edu every 6 years is time and resources. We talked about the growth of Google. We talked about the growth of Facebook and the social web. And in our last episode, we talked about the Google SERP. So today we're going to talk about the future of answering questions. So the future of answering questions is, I'm going to say it, AI. So there's a lot of people putting a lot of effort into AI right now, a lot of it, right? So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how we ask questions. It's worth just checking out how we currently ask questions. So of course, we currently ask questions by going to Google. Google is a verb. Let me Google that. I'm going to Google that. When newly aware families become aware of your institution, they have a lot of questions, but they don't know specifically what the questions are. I mean, they know some of the things. Where is it? How much is it? And does it have the programs for me to enable to succeed? So once those questions are reasonably answered, it's close, it's far, it's in a city, it's a rural. Once those questions are reasonably answered, you start to look at the price, and then you start to dig in. But what people do a lot is they just Google the school by name, right? So when you Google the University of Toronto by name, what Google is trying to do currently, right now, what Google is trying to do is answer all the questions it thinks you might have. So that's what this is, right? So it's saying people who Googled the University of Toronto also ask these questions. Would you like to know the answer to these questions? It even has a thing called things to know. So this is answers we think you should know. That's what it's basically saying. And on the knowledge panel on the right-hand side, it has costs, it has programs, it has all of the answers that it thinks that you might be asking right now at this point in the enrollment process. It changes slightly as we get through the enrollment process, but at this point, at the here's why you should apply stage, it's trying to answer all those questions. Now, I don't know if you noticed in the news in the last little while, but the government has recently been suing Google, and Google lost. The crux of the government's argument has been, among many other things, is that Google pays Apple $20 billion a year to be the default search engine in Safari. Meaning when most people go on their phones and they Google something in Safari, they're literally Googling something. They're not binging something. They're not doing anything else. And Google pays $20 billion with a B, $20 billion every year to Apple in order for Google to be the default search engine on Safari. The government has suggested that that is a monopolistic practice. It is antitrust, and has found Google guilty of this antitrust violation. The next step in this process is going to be the remedy process, which is also going to be a trial. It's going to be long. But the writing is kind of on the wall that Google, while being the best search engine, bar none, has risen to a place that other search engines cannot compete with it because of the traffic. I read somewhere that in 1 year, Google gets the same queries that it would take Bing 17 years to get. That actually might even be 1 month. In 1 month, Google gets the queries that it would take Bing 17 years. So it's this system, like when more people use it, Google learns how to show off the right information to people, right? And so it always has the best answers. But this is kind of changing. And you know where this is changing, right? Google is investing a lot of money in Gemini. And you can see the differences here, right? The differences in just the straight up in Google, which is a very clean interface that only has search and I'm feeling lucky. And Gemini is like, would you like to know this? Would you like to know this? Would you like to know this? Same with Copilot, Microsoft's alternative, right? This is going to change the way that we ask these questions. So Google is already hinting about it in the SERP. But instead of going to Google and typing in the University of Toronto early in the process, a prospective student might go to an AI and search in, what is student life like at? What is life like as a student at the University of Toronto? So those are questions you would never ask Google, but those are questions that you can start to ask an AI. And where I think it's going, I think it's going into more detailed prompts about life. So instead of Google trying to answer every question at every point in the enrollment process, what's going to happen is that we are going to start asking the appropriate questions at the appropriate time in the enrollment process. So you can say, if I apply to the University of Toronto, how much will the tuition be? Instead of trying to glean that information from a knowledge panel, you can glean that information right from an AI. So what is that also going to mean for institutions? Well, about half of the new visitor traffic comes from Google. And if Google is less of a search engine results page and more of I'll answer your question at the time without going to the .edu, then there's a solid chance that the .edu is going to get a lot less traffic from new visitors. And we might start to see that this year. And if the .edu gets less traffic from visitors, then there's less of a reason to refresh or redo the website. And there's more of a reason to start understanding the questions that people might ask of AI and start building pages on the .edu that answer those questions. So what do you think? What do you think about the future of search? Where do you think it's all going? Let me know. Tell me in comments where you think Google search is going now that it looks like the government may or may not break up Google, or at best or at worst, they're going to have to stop paying Apple to have a search engine. So will Apple build a search engine? Will ChatGPT's search engine win? I don't know, but these are really, really interesting times. And before you think like the government shouldn't get involved in this, 20 years ago when the government found that Microsoft was a monopoly and started to look at remedies, it enabled the internet to begin to grow. So the internet went from a closed operating system, Windows 95-ish, with one browser that every single person used, Internet Explorer, to a web-based solution where we got a bunch of different browsers, we got a bunch of different search engines, and yes, Google won it, but we also got the social web. We got all of that stuff out of going from an application-based internet to a browser-based internet, and that was good for all of us. So this is possibly good for all of us, that we're going to be leaving one search engine and going into a bunch of different ways to ask questions. Anyway, thanks for spending time with me, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I'm really interested in what you want to hear next, and I'll try to talk about it next. So have a great day and have a great week. Thanks. Bye.